And now I need to activate the microphone. So good morning once again. My name is Akiteng Isabella, and I will be hosting today's conversation. For those of you who might have stumbled into this discussion, this morning we will be looking at exploring the sustainability of civil society organizing in Uganda. We're looking at a review of research that has been conducted by CivSource Africa, but also looking at practical ways that we can move forward in regard to the conversation on sustainability in the sector. For those of you who are not joining us for the first time, you know that through the COVID lockdown period, the Uganda National NGO Forum hosted a couple of leaders gatherings, which were held online. And one of those gatherings looked solely at sustainability of the sector. In that conversation, I remember Arthur Larocque and Ms. Jackie Asimwe spoke to us about how we can be able to be more resilient as a sector. The study that we will be reviewing today or listening to in regard to findings is one that was conducted by CivSource Africa, and it feeds directly into that conversation that we had that was organized by the Uganda National NGO Forum. This particular conversation is proudly brought to us by the Uganda National NGO Forum in collaboration with CivSource Africa. But before we go into the program, I'd just like to walk us through. I know that the concept and program was shared with all of us, but in case you missed it, this is a conversation that we hope we can be done with by approximately 12:30 p.m. if we all keep time. On this side, we plan to keep time as well as possible. But we will start with introduction and welcome remarks from Ms. Jacqueline Asimwe, who is the CEO of CivSource Africa, after which we will hear from Ms. Ashanut Okille on the presentation of key findings from the research report that I have talked about. We will then have a short plenary session on the findings from the report. There is an active chat section, so do not hesitate to begin the conversation in the chat section as you interact with Ms. Okille. After her presentation, we will aggregate chat conversations plus any interactions that will be coming in from the audience, and we'll be glad to hear from you. Once we are done with the presentation of the findings, we'll go into the second session of today's conversation, which will be around options for sustainability and resourcing for civil society organizations. We have three eminent persons on the panel. We have Ms. Joyce Tamale, who is the CEO of Capital Solutions Limited, and she's also the chairperson of the Forum for Women in Democracy. We also have Mr. Leonard Okello, who will be talking to us about Nafasi, a conversation that heavily dominated the last conversation we had that was organized by the Uganda National NGO Forum. We also have Ms. Winfred Ngabiirwe, who is the Executive Director of Global Rights Alert, and she'll be telling us more about Ujasiri. There were a couple of questions around Ujasiri in the last conversation, and so today we decided that it would be a good idea to have longer discussions around Ujasiri, around Nafasi, but also around social enterprises being run by the civil society organizations. So without wasting any more time, I'd like to invite Ms. Jacqueline Asimwe, the CEO of CivSource Africa, to welcome us to this conversation. Jacqueline, over to you.
Isabella, I was trying to find my video so that at least people can see my face, but I guess this doesn't allow us. Good morning, all of us that have joined this conversation. Many thanks for joining us this morning. Many thanks to NGO Forum for co-convening this conversation with us. For those who do not know CivSource Africa, we are a philanthropy support organization, and we do many things to support the field of philanthropy in Uganda through research, through advisory services to donors that fund in Uganda, through strength building of leaders in civil society writ large, not just the NGO sector. And we also do a lot around narrative shaping, defining who we are and how we give as Ugandans and as Africans. We define ourselves, that is CivSource, as the place where civil society and philanthropy meet. And so part of being in that in-between space means that we want to contribute to generating research and having conversations that are about the sector, for the sector, or that propel the sector. And so we've had various other context conversations. This is one of them. We cannot talk about the sector without thinking about sustainability. As I was tweeting about this conversation last week, I said, there is no leader, and the leaders on this call will testify to that. There is no leader in the sector who doesn't wake up every day with that thought on their mind, who doesn't go to bed every night wondering, how do I make money? Where do I get the next grant? How do we sustain ourselves, sustain the work that we do, sustain the impact? So sustainability is one of those things that is ever present on our minds and in our hearts. And so we thought it was important to have this conversation. Secondly, we also noticed a trend where many organizations, in an attempt to solve the sustainability question, have acquired property, and with the hope that once they have their own home, they are able to manage certain of their own affairs. Because we do understand that dependence creates very deep vulnerability. And it's hard to go through life being vulnerable, being at the whim of somebody else. And that is in fact partly why we developed offerings such as Ujasiri and Nafasi, because that too is an attempt at sustainability. But if we talk about property acquisition in particular, we wanted to study this phenomenon and how it contributes to sustainability. Does it really? And in what respects? For those that want to acquire their property, what can they learn from those that have gone before so that they don't make the same mistakes? And how do we do this better? And just my final thought on this is just for us to remember that, you know, property acquisition is good, of course, but we must remember that we cannot remain small-minded if we are going to do big things. So how do we match the kind of thinking that drives sustainability within the sector? So how do we, you know, how do we increase that mental bandwidth that we need if we are going to talk about questions of sustainability? So I welcome us all, and I will hand it back to you, Isabella. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for joining us from wherever, but yes, it's lovely to always hear your voice. And thank you for those kind remarks, looking at dependence and the fact that dependence creates sustainability, and yet the sector that we all belong to, which is the civil society sector, employs so many people. And so it's important that when we are talking sustainability, we are also looking at how dependent our structures, our systems can be for the people that we work with. And so at this point, I'd just like to encourage everyone who is on the call to please introduce yourselves in the chat section. Tell us where you're from, what organization you're joining us from, so that we can be able to know who is with us in the room. For those of you who might have further questions, depending on the conversation that is happening, I know that Ashanut did this study with a couple of people who might be in the chat section. So don't hesitate to ask questions right there, because we will be able to respond to them once she's done with her submissions. On this note, I'd like to invite Ms. Ashanut Okille to give us some of the key findings from the study that she conducted. So over to you, Ashanut.
Okay, thanks. Thanks a lot, Isabella, for that. And CivSource and NGO Forum, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. As Jackie mentioned earlier, the study was carried out to really try and understand property acquisition by NGOs. And there were two broad questions that we were looking at. I think the first one was, do we contribute to financial sustainability? And then the second one was some recommendations or a checklist that was really to funders or to those who would be interested in supporting NGOs to acquire property. What are some of the things that they should consider? As Isabella has mentioned, the study was carried out by a team. There was myself, there was Joyce, who is on this panel, there was Rama Omonya. He will try and join us online, and then there was Coleman and Tungurisho, a lawyer with Katende Sempewa. We collected the data in 2020. I think that was just when the lockdown had happened, when we had started all these sort of virtual ways of working. And we spoke to, I think there were about 20 NGOs, purposefully selected, looking for NGOs that own property, as well as NGOs that we knew sort of were intending to acquire property. We spoke to NGOs based in Kampala, as well as some NGOs based out of Kampala. And when we refer to property in the study, really we were looking at NGO offices or NGO premises. Can an NGO owning office premises actually contribute to financial sustainability? Now, as Isabella mentioned earlier, this is part of a broader conversation around sustainability in the sector. And so when we talk about sustainability, what are we looking at? It's really about the ability of an organization to secure sufficient resources to enable it to consistently and effectively carry out its mission. And that is really what we're trying to see. If you acquire property, to what extent will it really contribute towards that? I'm also mindful that since then we've had COVID-19 and its impacts, there might be different views about whether or not acquisition of property still makes sense. So it will be very useful, I think, at the end of, during the conversation, for us to be able to reflect on this, yeah. So I am looking for my slides. Yes.
It will be in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, so as we wait for the slides, I'll take this now. So the purpose of the study, as I mentioned, is really to interrogate whether and how acquisition of owned property contributes to sustainability of NGOs in the short, medium, and long term. We're also trying to find any best practices or lessons learned for those who may be interested in acquiring property. The study methodology was, we did a literature review, and then, as I mentioned earlier, had some key informant interviews. I think everything was done virtually, except one meeting that we had. Now, a question that we asked all the respondents at the beginning was, did they actually think that acquisition of property was important for NGOs, and did it contribute to sustainability? 95%, which is really almost everyone, really saw property ownership, and this is critical, as an anchor for financial sustainability. So owning property does not necessarily equate to financial sustainability, but it can contribute to that. And a number of NGOs, yes, the other reason was because owning property would be able to help the organizations offset some of the costs that they are paying towards rent. For a number of NGOs, that's a very high aspect of their budgets and their expenditure. So we looked at the various reasons that were advanced for owning property, and categorized them into four. The first one is economic. The second reason is what we call sustained interventions. The third one is social standing and influence. Acquisition of property can contribute to social standing and influence. And then the fourth one is security. May not guarantee security, physical security and safety, but it can contribute to that. Let me just check if this thing is working. Is it supposed to? No. All right. So how does acquisition of the economic reason or rationale for property ownership? I think, as I mentioned earlier, one, it's about being able to reduce expenditure on rent. And really, the organization said, when we reduce the expenditure of rent, the money that we would have used, to pay the rent, we can then channel towards programs and other interventions for the organization. Then the second reason was that property can be used to generate income. So either investing the property or investing in the property, turning the property, using it as a source of rent, for example. Some organizations using their spaces for hire, for meetings and other purposes. So those are the two main sort of justifications that were given in that respect. Yeah. Now, in addition to economic, there is also the sustained interventions. Now, this was particularly raised by organizations that, I'll use the word, offer services in particular geographical locations, or whose interventions require communities or their target group to come to them. Now, an example was FIDA, for example, or other organizations that offer legal aid, or there are some that provide microfinancing, where it's important for them to have a consistent location, physical location, in order for them to be found. Sorry, I just need some assistance here. This is not working. Okay, so yeah, that was the second reason. Sustained interventions, where you needed to have a particular physical location for organizations to be able to access the services. The third reason given was social standing and influence. And really, what respondents told us was that when you own property, it can enhance the social status of an organization amongst peers, the public, and other stakeholders. One, because when you have owned property, you have that sense of confidence, that sense of stability, and it gives you the confidence when you're negotiating, for example, with funders. And there's a quote here in the report where someone says, you see, people see you differently when you own property, and they take you more seriously. And especially, I think, in the current context, when there are all these conversations around NGOs, are they briefcase, are they serious? So when you have your property, it really contributes to that. And people take you more seriously as an actor in the sector. The other reason given was security. The other reason given was security. Let me just, yeah, gray, it's working. Yes, security. And really, owning property will not guarantee your physical security, but it can contribute to that. So it provides secure premises, a home from which to operate that cannot be easily disrupted. That's what 80% of respondents said. But again, I guess that's a moot point. But that was their a moot point. But that was their perspective. The other one is really for organizations that are investing in security infrastructure. We met with organizations that have had break-ins before, and as a result, they had invested in the cameras, the fencing, and so many installations. And so if you do that in a property that is not yours, that's a huge investment. And so if you have your own property, then you can feel confident to invest really heavily in that security infrastructure. Then we also came across organizations that really, their landlords, the property owners kept hiking the rent because some of the work that they do is risky. And so they know that the organizations do not have very many options. And so having their own property, organizations like that, really allows them to confidently carry out their work. And in many instances, they even use those premises to carry out workshops and meetings instead of having to spend extra costs on venues. Now, an example was given of an organization who was given 13 days to leave their premises. Fortunately, they had bought a property, they had a piece of land somewhere. So what they did was to get a container, set that up, and use that as office premises as they started constructing their property. So the fact that they had their own land and premises gave them that sort of sense of security of tenure. So there are other reasons. Social capital is also another reason, especially in communities where, as an organization, when you have office premises, there's a sense of permanence, there's a sense of commitment that it gives. And you find that communities then can trust you more and are more engaging in your interventions. The other thing that we found is that some NGOs have been able to bid for high volume programs, because in some proposals, you're asked to show what your contribution will be towards program costs. And so when they put the value of their office premises, that increases their contribution, but also because then they don't have to pay rent. So that has worked well for some organizations. Then the other thing, and I know Joyce will speak to social enterprises later, there's been an increasing conversation as organizations are speaking about and reflecting on sustainability around engaging in social enterprises. And what we found was that, one, these properties can actually be used as a venue or for hosting those social enterprises to generating income, which can then be invested into social enterprises. We reflected on what we are calling the business case for NGO property ownership. When does it make sense for NGOs to acquire or own property? One, and when it can lead financial or contribute to financial sustainability. One is if you can actually see that the property can contribute towards income generation for the organization. The second one is, as I mentioned earlier, there are those organizations that deal with politically, socially, culturally sensitive issues, and that makes it really difficult for them to have affordable and secure premises for their interventions. The other one is if you look at the property and it offers a good deal where you can have really a return on investment. So you look at the finances and what you can generate in terms of income. The other one that we saw is if the property could possibly be shared with other NGOs. That way you're actually reducing the costs of operations, not just for one organization, but for other organizations in the sector. Then the other one, like we mentioned earlier, is where really it's critical or very important for the organization to have a physical location. Now, this was interesting. In terms of sources of financing, the organizations we met, really what we found is that most of them use a combination of sources of financing. One organization used internal savings, where what they did was when they would have programs or projects and not, for example, they didn't spend all their administrative costs or were able to have savings, they were able to put that aside and use that to either purchase or to acquire land on which to do construction. Those who did that were able to negotiate those terms with their funders and really agreed with them that, if we do have these savings, can we put that aside? The other one was grants. Now what we found was that I think it was only 2 or 3 of the respondents who got grants to acquire property, but even then the grants had to be augmented by other sources of funding. The general impression was that getting grants for property is a challenge. And in one instance, I remember what this organization did, because they were given a flexible budget for core support for their organization. So what they did was to negotiate or discuss with the funder and say, look, can we use a large percentage of this to acquire property? And that was okay with the funder. So there have been some grants that have been used for property acquisition. The other one was internal borrowing. And in this particular example, actually the organization drew on, I would call it a member, no, it was a member contribution and internal borrowing. So a member of the board, yes, internal savings, a member of the board donated some money to the organization, and the organization put the money on a fixed deposit account for about 2 or 3 years. And then what they did was to borrow from the gratuity within the organization. And then they used that to purchase a plot of land. Of course, all these have pros and cons. The challenge when you borrow internally, what happens, when you need the money if you don't have it back. But that is something that they did in order to get financing for the property. Then the other source of financing was mortgages. I think it's only 2 organizations that were able to acquire mortgages. And even then, it was quite a rigorous process. One had to even have letters from embassies and so on. We actually met with a representative from, I think, Housing Finance Bank, and then another investment firm. And what they said was, look, lending to NGOs is very risky. One, they have no guaranteed source of income, but also depending on the issues that the organization is working on, so the NGO can be closed at any moment. So mortgages, a bit tricky there. The other one was sales from related products of NGOs. Now, this particular organization we spoke to runs a resource center. And so in the resource center, they were able, I think they had an internet cafe, they were able to sell stationery. So a various number of products. And that was able to actually generate them a good amount of money, which contributed again to their financing. Then there's one particular organization that we met. They did some consulting work, and they got a significant amount of money from that work, and then put that money towards purchasing their property. Then member contribution. This NGO, actually, they had a discussion amongst the membership, and then they levied like a building fee, to members, and members made that contribution, and they were able to use it, purchase land, and start the construction. At the time of the interview, I think they had done the first floor. They wanted to have a storage building. So there are different ways, there are different sources of financing. But like I mentioned earlier, in most instances, organizations don't just rely on one, but it's a combination of different financing mechanisms that they have used in order to purchase the property. Now, there are some risks to owning property by NGOs. One is mission or program drift, where at the end of the day, the organization focuses more on generating the income and managing the property, which actually takes up so much time. The organizations that we met mentioned that property and the related costs of running property. So that's one risk. The other one we found interesting was one organization that said, since they, with their proposal, own property, so maybe you don't need to be interested. The other one is management conflicts, especially around the procurement, acquisition, management, disposal of property. If you don't have your systems and structures right to occur. Then the other one is unclear or unrealistic economic agenda. Again, and as you'll see later, we really advise that organizations plan and calculate the costs, because managing a property can be quite expensive. So if you haven't really thought through it, it can end up becoming an economic burden. Then the other one that we noted, call it a challenge or a gap, is really the knowledge gap amongst NGOs on economic dimensions of acquiring property. I'm trying to recall, but I think there are some of the organizations that we spoke to, and I remember asking, do you actually have a business plan for this? And they didn't necessarily have it. You have the ideas, we want to build the office, and we'll rent the space and so on, but you really haven't sat down to think through what that would mean in terms of actual costs in the short and long term. Now, I've mentioned earlier, I spoke about the potential conflicts that can arise. So we reflected a bit on institutionally, what are some of the things that an organization should do when you think of the institutional framework? What could contribute to a strong institutional framework? One idea was setting up a trust, really to manage the property, so that you have really an independent group of individuals whose responsibility is to oversee that property for the organization. So taking it away from the operational structure within the organization. The other key part of the institution is the role of the board, the governance. So the board is really, really critical in providing oversight in this process. So an effective and functional board is really important. And when we think of the organizations, just trying to reflect, I think most of those that we met have had board transitions at least 2 or 3 times. I think one of them even up to 6 or 7 times. So showing that stability in terms of governance within the organization, I think is important for this. Then the other one is the role of the members, keeping a keen interest in the property, and yet not meddling with the management. So being able to draw that balance. Again, this is really as for the accountability. A financial and procurement system, really important, that should be transparent and enable you to acquire value for money. Then the other one is business management skills. We really shouldn't underestimate the management skills required to manage this property. And if you're going to invest it, how do you actually run a business? Now, one of the things we were asked, one of our outputs or requirements for the assignment was to come up with a checklist for potential funders. And we thought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that these 7 points would be critical. One is you want to really look at the legal aspect. Is the organization legally incorporated with all the relevant structures in place? The other one is the genuineness of the title. Make sure that the land title is genuine. Financial. You want to invest in an organization that has a good track record of prudent financial accountability, clean audited accounts, at least over time. Then leadership, again, is really critical at the executive level. Prudent, accountable financial management, but overall leadership within the organization. Then governance, as I mentioned earlier, succession, transition, because property is being owned over a long period of time. So can the organization, does it have that track record of succession so that you continue having leaders and management that will oversee the property? Then the other thing which is really critical is to really understand, why is the property being acquired? Is there a business plan? What exactly is the intention? That has to be really, really critical. Legal comes there again. And also it's important to always monitor policy, legislative changes that may affect ownership of user rights. So what did we recommend? We said, there really has to be some support, technical advice and planning. We can't underestimate that. Why do you want the property? What type? Where? What are the financials? What are the risks? A business plan is really pretty central. governance and controls. And actually, we recommend that if an organization is going to support property acquisition, they should also invest in institution building, supporting really the strengthening of the organization. Yes, then the other one, optimal benefit, I think I spoke earlier about maybe having one property that can be shared by various NGOs. So it is a desired option. It can contribute to financial sustainability. However, it needs to be guided by business needs. You know, you need a strong governance system to manage the property well. So I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening today.
Thank you very much, Ashanut, for taking us through the study. Property is one of those conversations that people love to hate in the sector. Yes, because you know, as you spoke about, I sit on a board, and our last board meeting was about property acquisition, and we were literally split on the issues that you raised as recommendations. One on why do we want this land? Must we really have this land? And so yes, there was a lot of back and forth, but it would be a good time to open up for plenary. And in case you have any additional comments, in case you'd like to enrich some of the points that Ashanut made from the study, this is a good time for us to open up the webinar. Unfortunately, I cannot see your hands because the screen is blue. But I hope that we can be able to see anyone who would like to share experiences. You have experiences to share on how you managed to acquire property or failed to acquire it or failed to manage it, you know, because I think each of us has a tale to tell within the institutions that we have been working in. But also, if you raise them, there are chances that those answers on sustainability might be responded to by anyone on the panel. But yes, this would be a good time for us to raise our issues. So I'm not seeing any hands. Oh yes, Taimwa, Albert, you asked for the presentation. I believe that the presentation, the executive summary will be made available to you, and then we will see about having the presentation availed as well. But in case anyone has a hand, oh, okay, now this one has hands. Mine had no hands. Okay, so Okema William, your hand is up. Would you like to submit? Okema William?
Yes, please, madam.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, William.
It's time for your wonderful presentation. Mine is because some of us, like Tour Uganda is a small NGO. I don't know whether this such kind of important investment can be collaborated with other partners like Uganda NGO, National NGO Forum. I don't know if they can take leads. Like if the small partner want to do ABCD, if they can partner, work on a consortium. I don't know if the consortium program is also allowed. Would you please guide me in that area?
Okay, I might have missed your question, William. Would you like to restate it?
I was saying, that's kind of a very good investment. Did the partner, development partner also want collaboration? Because they don't trust other small NGOs, which has a big program. I was in a view that if, for instance, Uganda National NGO Forum can take like lead role as a lead partner to work with other development partners who are willing to take such kind of investment. Is it allowed for other development partners to take consideration on that?
I believe that Ashanut touched on that, but I believe she can also elaborate further. But for one of the recommendations that she made, as to the role of the Uganda National NGO Forum, Moses Isova will be giving closing remarks. So hopefully he will speak to possible collaborations with smaller organizations around acquisition of properties. And so I believe that he has taken note of that. Jackie, your hand is up. May we have you submit, please?
Yes, just to follow. Sorry, I was speaking and the host muted me. Sorry about that. I said
Host is losing it.
The host apologizes.
You know, and when you're the host and the host, so anyway, yeah. So I was following up on what William was saying, and maybe a question to Ashanut, because yes, there is a spectrum of organizations that have been able to acquire property, and it would be interesting to understand the other characteristics. You know, access to even their own savings. Are they of a certain age? Are they of a certain? Because what I hear from William's question is, what happens when you're a younger organizations, and the assumptions that are made about young organizations, you're less economically viable, maybe you don't quite have the systems, you know, so, and yet you're also thinking about the question of sustainability. So what would be, how do, you know, young, small organizations also think about and aspire to property acquisition, given the real existential challenges they face? And what can we think about, or what would be the answer for those kinds of organizations accessing the kinds of financing required to own property? Would we think of an intermediary such as NGO Forum or other intermediaries that are able to act as fiscal host for younger organizations that also would like to stand on their own 2 feet by property acquisition?
Any further questions? Emily Drani asks whether there was any experience on NGOs with a business arm or department that would manage the property semi-autonomously to avoid the challenges you mentioned about time, competence, etc. Let me see. Ongatai asks, do you have access on of the funders who support property investment for NGOs or CBOs? Because every donor asks that they don't have, because every donor says they don't have capital or investment costs, how can you help? Yeah. Let me see. Yes, so those are the questions we have so far, unless we have any hand. Jack, is your hand still up?
No, slowly lowering, slowly lowering.
Okay, Rita Chiro. My apologies. My eyes had decided to look at hands in another direction. But may we have Rita Chiro, please? Rita Chiro.
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Good
I
morning,
was just
Rita.
wondering, the team that conducted the research, whether they tried to find out why some organizations have never endeavored acquiring property. What could be the challenge? Maybe it's important for us to understand some of the challenges that people have. I'm also wondering whether there are other challenges organizations face in terms of ownership of property. Some of these organizations are started by individuals, or there is some stagnation. So maybe it would be important for us to interrogate some of the challenges that these organizations have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. Before I take another hand, we have a question from Kula Fahabat, which I'm going to defer from Ashanut to Joyce Tamale because it's more relevant to her discussion. And Kulafa asks, what happened to non-profit making organizations that would venture into owning property and having part of it rented out to other players? How can non-profit making agencies mitigate against the would-be penalties in situations where they own property and such are rented out? So I think that's a question more relevant to Joyce. Wawamba says, with the evolving context for CSOs, viable businesses and investments are inevitable for NGO sustainability, solely depending on the donors. That is also something that Joyce will build on in her submissions. James Opito, your hand is up. We will take you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the discussion has given us light. On behalf of NGO Forum, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I would like to share our experience as NGO Forum The forum, through members' contribution, bought a parcel of land. And after some time, it appreciated. And because there was need for sustainability, Gulenjo Forum decided to sell part of the land so that they can acquire some funds to build a house for the forum. And eventually, the forum has built itself a coordination house. And now the question which still lingers around is how to sustain the existing house. At least we have a space, and we are sure that continuity is possible. But now the question of sustainability still comes in the aspect of how do we maintain the current assets that we have. And I have just had a very interesting idea about the trust that we can open, we can initiate a trust that can govern the assets other than keeping it to the day-to-day staff who should run the programs to also think about maintaining the assets. My question is, how do we streamline the role of the board and the secretariat vis-a-vis the role of the trust? Because I also foresee possibility of conflict of interest, or at least conflicting interest in terms of managing the assets. Maybe I would like to hear a lot more light on that, because I think that could also be beneficial to us as Gulenjo Forum. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Okito.
Yeah.
Simon Peter asks, what are the risks and challenges that arise from the fact that NGOs mostly operate as non-profits and may be hindered by existing laws? Secondly, the risk of losing out when an organization is dissolved or closed down may also be a big hurdle to property ownership. That's a question that I will leave for Ashanut, but also defer to Joyce. Joyce, there's a second question for you around dissolution of organizations and what happens to the property at that time. Winfred, your hand is up.
I'm called Winfred. I am the team leader for Citizen Initiative for Democracy and Development Uganda, that is CID Uganda, located in Bukit sub-region. I want to appreciate the presentation and probably call it an eye-opener. But there's something I wanted also to learn from the research that was done. We've had diversity of organizations. You find organizations that have acquired property. You have those ones who have either ignored or not been able to acquire this property. You find those ones who are struggling to get this property. I wanted to know from the research, probably if we got out some message in terms of what are the advantages that these other organizations that have acquired property had after acquiring property. And then secondly, how have they been able to maintain their focus in terms of vision, mission? Because we know that at times when organizations acquire property, at times it becomes a source of drilling people's direction, starting to think that now organization has property, and so probably we can mortgage, we can sell it, and get benefit out of it as the board. And so how have those organizations that have acquired this property for quite a time been able to remain focused with the vision, also while maintaining probably the transition of the leaders who have come and gone? That is what is trying to bother me so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. We have 4 hands. I'm going to ask that no one else puts up their hand after these 4. But now people are increasingly putting up. Please don't put up your hands anymore. Don't make me get very violent. But Jackie, you have a question in the comment section. So when we come back, you will respond to your question first, and then we'll go to Ashanut. But there's a question from Sebs Kadoket, who asks, when an NGO acquires property and uses it to generate money, does it still uphold the principle of non-profit making? Do they then have to pay taxes? And any of the panelists can address that, but it will really go to Ashanut. Joseph Kasozi.
Thank you, Isabella. This is Joseph. I thank you so much, Ashanut, for the research. It's really good. I would like to know if the research in your presentation, you talked about NGOs not getting funding because the development partners tell them that they have already acquired the home, so they assume they are stable. I don't know if the research looked at the development partners need or what they require in order to support the acquiring of property, and if the research also covered which development partners support acquiring of property, because I see some of them don't have it in their mandate. So I don't know if you had also looked into the ones who are giving that funding.
Thank you very much, Joseph. We will take Okema, William. Oh, okay. How about Okello Simon Peter? William, would you like to put your hand down? Okello Simon Peter? Ivan, oh, okay. So how about David Oriem?
My name is David Oriem, as mentioned. I work for Foka Power, Forum Fokalongo Parish Women Association in South Foka Power. It's my pleasure to be part of this meeting. And I'm very grateful that the report has opened some few things that we're really looking forward to adopt. However, just some few things that I would also love that report could be able to distinct. I know this is a very good topic, but was it in possession, the report, was it in that avenue to analyze the conflict or the how the high NGOs, the NGOs and CBOs, how relationship is that? The NGOs and the CBOs, there's that other in competitive way that these things cannot be gone. Would also be okay if this report, I know maybe it was done or it wasn't interacted with, to analyze the context of the CBOs, the national NGOs at regional level, to see that if this can be adapted, so that this can also be strengthened, how we could continue to mobilize resources, how this can be sustainable in the future thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is a question from Ravamba that I'm going to defer to Joyce. It says, how can CSOs effectively manage the business arm and still maintain strong programs and services? Many times there's a compromise in service delivery when they focus on business. Yes, so I will leave that to Joyce and then leave Ashanut to handle the study. Okille Immaculate, your hand is up.
Hello. Thanks for this wonderful presentation. I've been keenly listening to the presentation and noted that most of the issues you are raising cut across different institutions. Personally, I'm a banker by profession, and you raised a number of issues around governance, management, policy, systems, controls, and others looking at sound practices. And from observation, you really have work cut out for you, because I notice many institutions struggle with separating governance from management. And also, many do not have clear policies, procedures to help the governance arm try as much as possible to play an oversight role while management does the operations. And some of the challenges you raised clearly, many may not be having business plans in place. Some may not even have board policies. Others would also have challenges in investments, whether they have investment committees that can advise, for instance, you mentioned something on trustees, but also what kind of investment can the institutions do? And while they are doing that, how can they avoid risks? Okay. From what you are presenting, it is quite clear that many contribute ideas and you build the capacity of some of these people and tapped resource that would help the governance structure be stronger. And you end up having the NGO not focusing probably in one area or in one sub-county, but begins having a national outlook, eventually becomes international because it is growing.
Bankers or experts. So thank you very much, Immaculate, for that elaborate submission. We have, Simon Peter, you asked about NGO Forum helping to create an enabling environment for the NGOs to acquire property. I'm not sure that's their role, but I will I will let Ashanut handle that as we take Kuwaje Joyce. Joyce.
Okay, good morning, delegates at the meeting. This is Kuwaje Joyce from Mindset Change Front Initiative, Uganda. I'm very glad to be here with you, and indeed it has been a really educative approach. Yeah, I happen to have come in late due to network problems, but at least I've tried to grasp some of the content. Talking about the sustainability of the NGOs, am I good? Hello?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Hello?
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Joyce, can I just read your comment in the chat section? Because your connection is quite bad.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay. I was still commenting, raising up an issue that, for example, we Mindset Change Front Initiative Uganda, we are setting up some initiatives, some skills empowerment, of which out of here we make some products. Then out of the products, we go look for the market and sell them. Then the profit margins we get out of it, it is what sustains the organization. Though it's not enough, because the organization it's stretching one person. We are not targeting 10. We are not targeting 100. We are to be. So maybe even this small portion of the profit.
Okay, Josh, I'm going to read your comment from the chat section.
Margin we get. Still, it's not bit in my content. Still, that calculation qualifies to be the profit-making organization. Yet we have okay.
Okay, but I hear you because I know in the chat section you said that you use your profits to run the organization. So does that make you a non-profit? And I will leave that to Ashanut and to Joyce to respond to that. Agenonga. That one.
Whom do I trust?
That one. Who do I trust? Let whom do I trust speak?
Yes, Isabella, thank you. My name's Ngabiirwe. It's right. He has given the right meaning of the name. I hope everyone is fine. I'm from Albertine Institute for Community Development, ACOD. This one is located in Kikube district. Kikube is so far the last born of Hoima district, so it was carved out of Hoima.
So far. Please go ahead. Don't get too comfortable.
You never know tomorrow. Yeah, with the district. Yeah, I can say that because you never know tomorrow may have another one. Then Hoima doesn't cease being a last born. Kikube, I mean. So my concern is I'm very grateful for this session, and really as ACOD, we've gained a lot because it's a new CBO in the area, which was formed mainly due to a lack of information, people not having much information, mainly in the oil-rich area. So we felt that we should have this CBO to let people have the right first-hand information and feed them with the right information. So on sustainability, really this one we gained a lot because most CBOs and NGOs are formed. People do think that we shall just keep surviving on grants, which is not the case. So I would advise fellow NGOs and CBOs that let's focus much on a member contribution because a grant may come once in a while. So if we rely much on grants, we may find that we are going to stay, we are going to be chased even from rents because we've not got grants. So member contribution is key. We've really appreciated this research because of this. We can now build on this. And that member contribution mainly should look at things like rent, furniture, stationery. Those ones, if we have our own, can help us from the embarrassments of being chased out of rent. Then my question is that according to the NGO Act of 2016, a CBO is supposed to operate in one sub-county. So we are having some study to look at how the ECOP is going to move, and starting from Hoima up to Rakai or Chotera, for that matter, and traverses through 10 districts. So if I'd like to follow that route to make some research and using the CBO, what do I do? Where do I get the permission to move in all those districts, yet just refined to one sub-county? Thank you.
Please follow the law, but thank you very much. Thank you very much for your questions, but please follow the law. Don't break the law. There's a lot of comments in the chat section, but just one last one. Some partners take back assets from other partners after the project closes, leaving sub-grantees with only knowledge. I would like to know whether the researcher looked at this because it hinders the sustainability of small institutions. Yes, and that is from Samson Namoyo. Otherwise, please keep the conversations and questions coming in. We shall figure out a way of responding to them. But for now, Jackie, would you like to respond to your question? The rest of the people who have put up your hands, I had asked that you don't put up your hands, but we will consider you for the next round. Jackie Asimwe, she had one question.
Sorry, Bella. Yes, and I think the question that I saw from Kakuru would best be answered by Ashanut, actually, because he was asking what lessons do we learn, I believe, was that the question, from those that own property?
Yes.
Remind me whether that was it. That's what I think I saw.
Yes.
And remember that I said going in, sustainability is quite broad, and property acquisition is one way that some members of the sector have chosen to partly address that question. Of course, it doesn't address everything, but we all know that making rent, making payroll, there are certain things that we struggle with on a daily, where and so the assumption is if we have property, we are addressing one part of what it means to be stable, not necessarily sustainable, to be stable. But I think the banker was also asking that we think of other ways to be sustainable. So I will hand it to Ashanut to tell us what did we learn from the study, and the study will be made available for those who would like to access it, so that we can look at it again, read it in depth, but also to understand it is one way. We have to think of multiple ways alongside property acquisition. And that's why I'm glad that we have Joyce and Winnie and Leonard to speak to us about other possible ways, because I'd like us to view sustainability as a basket of options. And while property acquisition might not for now be part of the basket or part of the option from the basket that one chooses, there can be other ways or other options that organizations draw from.
Okay, thank you very much, Jackie. This conversation has taken longer than we thought. And so I'll hand over to Ashanut to respond.
Just how many minutes? The questions, okay, the questions are quite a number. So I will just speak broadly to some of the issues emerging. I think the lady from the bank is called Okille. Yeah, Immaculate. Really immaculate. I think you really clarified some key some key points from this study. I would say when NGOs look at property acquisition, we need to look at it, if it's going to contribute to financial sustainability, look at it from that lens. Is it an investment that makes financial sense for you now and in the sort of medium to longer term? And so that's why the purpose needs to be extremely clear. So where you've got property that is purchased, and I think it's Rita who mentioned you don't see any increased value on the property, and so you need to go back and ask, why was this property acquired? What was the purpose? Was there a clear vision when it was acquired? So purpose, planning is critical. Planning for both the business property management element of it, but also for the institution. The governance, the management, the accountability, the financial management and systems, all those really need to be intact. And as you do the planning, there should also be a conversation around the solution. What happens at the end of the day if the NGO ceases to exist? Are you going to donate the property? Do you sell the property? How do you share the proceeds and so on? So I would say fundamentally that is it. You need to be very clear about the purpose. Then you need to plan for the business and property management, and then also plan for the institutional management of the property. Then there was a question about lessons learned. There were quite a few that are in the report, but again, the purpose for the acquisition needs to be very clear. The resource implications, again, the business case for it. Transparency, having strong governance. I think those are really the core. I think those would be the core messages out of this study, that you need to be clear on the purpose, plan for the property management, and plan to have a strong institution. Now, the question of younger organizations, I think is really interesting. And Jackie, you asked about what are the characteristics. Joyce is here with me, and I think you'll agree that when we look at most of the organizations, I think there had been at least about 10 years or so. They are organizations that have a track record of their work that have enabled the organizations to acquire the membership organization, an umbrella organization, possibly acquiring property and then maybe leasing it at a lower cost to some of their members as they grow, build the capacity and the track record that is required for them to have such an investment. How do you manage to maintain focus as well as manage property? And I think I'll link that to the question around, did we find an organization that was able to effectively manage the business arm? As I mentioned earlier, when we carried out this study, we were looking at property as NGO premises. Now, what we found was those who are able to sublet, say, part of their property, had a staff member, usually falling under finance and admin, who was responsible for overseeing that. We didn't get any organizations that had set up like social enterprises and had had a different management arm for that. Access to funders, no, I do not have a list of funders who can invest in property. But interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, part of the reason for this study was to actually inform funders that were considering this. Does it make sense? Is there a business case? And what are some of the things that they need to look at? There were so many questions. I think maybe I'll just respond to the last one. Gulu NGO Forum was one of the respondents for this this study. And indeed, that's where you had members making a contribution towards purchasing of the property. So I think the question you ask is around how do you delineate the responsibility between when you have a trust where you have a board and then you have the management. I think one of the organizations we met that was able to do that said that they had to have that very clearly articulated within their memorandums and articles of association. I would say that it goes now again to your planning. Make sure that you have, a lawyer, a legal advisor to help you think through those details and have them clearly articulated in your documents before you get into acquiring or even managing the property. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashanut, for your submissions and for attempting to respond to all the questions that were raised. At this point, without wasting any more time, we will be going into the conversation, the presentation around sustainability. And looking at the chat section, there's been a lot of conversation around social enterprises, but there's also been a lot of questions around how we deal with the business of running an NGO alongside the business of making money away from donors. And so it's only appropriate that we go into a conversation around setting up a successful social enterprise and how they can contribute to CSO sustainability, what is required, and this will be done by Ms. Joyce Tamale, who is the CEO of Capital Solutions, but also the chairperson of the Forum for Women in Democracy. You're very much welcome, Joyce, and please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you very much, Isabella. My name is Dr. Joyce Tamale from Capital Solutions, gladly associated with CivSource Africa, and I chair the board of Forward. So just to respond to some of the comments that came in, they will be part of my conversations around social entrepreneurship, but also to affirm that an NGO can do business comfortably under Section 4.6 of the NGO Act, as long as the money is plowed back to meet the organization's mission. So it's very, very clear. Only a few NGOs have been able to exercise and use that opportunity. So all of us can do business as long as it doesn't take you off the mission and you plow back the revenue under Section 4.6. So my discussion begins pure years I've been able to lead a good, successful social enterprise in Uganda, but I'm also now giving support to accelerate social entrepreneurship. So what is social entrepreneurship anyway? It has three angles. One, it has to be having a business connotation. It has to bring in cash flow. That is the beginning. And then it will have to have a social problem being solved. The social problems are many. If you look at the SDGs, you're either solving a poverty, employment, health, name it, environmental. It must have a connotation on a social problem. And then it must use innovative solutions, not the traditional solutions. Innovation is what leads social entrepreneurship. So people ask, what is it? Where do I register as a social enterprise? And this has been a journey. We all know in Uganda, we have three sectors. You will register at Uganda Registration Bureau as a company limited by shares. So you have shareholders and you are either doing corporate work and doing profits. And then you have the traditional way of charity, where you register as a company limited by guarantee, and you can go to the NGO board and get an NGO certificate. So the social enterprise model is coming in as a business model, not yet a sector moving there, but any of the two can run a social enterprise. A company limited by share will run a social enterprise model as long as you agree to plow back part of the profits or everything. And you can also run a social enterprise model as an NGO. That is, you're making business and you plow back the money to reach wider people and also make impact. So why would you start a social enterprise anyway if you're an NGO that has a lot of grants? One, you need to overcome the single funding source dependency. That is a killer. I've seen NGOs that have started with large grants and eventually they close shop. So you need to do social enterprise model to run away from that. Secondly, social entrepreneurship uses market-driven approaches. So you create your demand. I will tell you there is no private sector company that doesn't create its own demand. There is always supply, but then you need to trigger the demand for the services and products to be picked. The pressure of COVID-19, the research which came out last month showed that only 1% of social enterprises globally closed. Only 1%, 99% remained running because of the model of business and also contribution to the SDGs. So these are some of the social enterprises I wanted to share with you, because in Uganda, who are they? I've worked and led Uganda Health Marketing Group, which I thought was a very, very inspiring social enterprise model, which is really a good thing. And also Forward has what we call Speak FM. It started as a community radio. Right now we are at a mood of making it is almost becoming a commercial radio, but it's a social enterprise, an arm of Forward. Then we have Grameen Bank, which started as a small microfinance in Indonesia. Now it has 2,250 branches, one of the largest banks in Uganda, started by Professor Yunus. It's a social enterprise, large, and doing great. We have Tugende, which supports borders in Uganda. It's purely a social enterprise. It makes profits, but plows back, but also gives some to the company as part of dividends. Capital Solutions, company limited by shares, but it's a social enterprise, 100%, everything done. Kilere, they do oils, and this is also a social enterprise started in Uganda. The Market Garden app by IST, at the time I chaired IST, this was started during COVID to support the market women, and it's bringing in revenue for them. Yuga Bus was also started in Uganda. It's a social enterprise that helps you not to go to the bus park to get a bus ticket. You get it on your phone, and the company is making money as a social enterprise. Look Solar is also a social enterprise, was an NGO, but decided to do the solar distribution in the villages with a social mindset. So now the grant they got from Germany stopped, and they are able to sustain themselves. So there are quite a lot of things we can do. In the recent past, I've been working with Send a Cow Uganda to do an agribusiness, store for what they've been doing for a long time. So in the long run, you can transition and be able to sustain what you're doing in a more compliant way. So what are some of the things that you need to do? I'll just give you a few tips, not everything, because time is not on my side, on how you can start and sustain a social enterprise. Now, I always say you must have to build your business using an ABC model. That is the ambition of the founders, the leadership. Ashanut has talked about leadership quite a bit and governance. That drives the social enterprise model. Because if you come in with a mindset of an NGO, let's wait for grants, the ambition will be stifled. Then the belief also that what you're designing will work, very, very essential. And the change is painful at the beginning. When somebody is triggering you to go to the street and sell your service or product, you'll be threatened because you will not get a sale in the first week. But when you get one client to even say, how much does it cost? Then you've started the journey. Because the next time they will say, can you sell me? Then as I go forward, I'll tell you, give a freebies, a trial. That's what commercial banks do. And that way you'll be able to attract one client. And before you know it, your services can be picked and the NGO thrives. Now, I just chose this because you must build a strong, attractive brand as a leader and as a company. People buy because they know somebody. They will buy a product even if it's a sweater and say, oh, I love that sweater because it was made by so-and-so. So we start with the personal branding, it's a whole topic, and then the company branding. You can buy a product because Vitatray has talked about it. You actually have no clue what that product does. The same thing to these two. Without a name, without anything, anybody can tell this and all associate with them. But they started in garages. These are garages products. Apple started in a garage. Nike started in a garage. Somebody was even asking, what is it with garage products? So any NGO, all of you are a country in small little spaces, but those are garages anyway in Africa. So why don't we brand, talk about that little brand? If you're doing economic empowerment of women in Koima, can you brand it in a way that anybody can buy that service for you to go to Rakai and they're paying you for it? And that is what we call attracting a brand, and you get paid for it. Then the mindset. Mindset is the better mindset that I keep talking about. The story of the two salesmen that was sent by a British shoe company to come to Africa. One salesman said, there's no potential, nobody wears shoes. So I don't see any business in Africa. The second the second salesman said, send all the shoes, nobody wears shoes. So the one person saw an opportunity, and as NGOs, we don't see these opportunities. I can tell you there's a lot of business in the private sector. We just don't know how to seize it. The mindset is so skewed to grants, and we are not even ready to receive any challenges. So I would just ask that we open up our minds, since the NGO Act allows us under 4.6 to do business. It could be education, online, whatever it is. The little it brings in is unrestricted, that relieves the board, the management from sleepless nights. And then state your value proposition. What business understands is value proposition. What is your value proposition? I'm your client. What is it that you're treating me for me to give you my dollar? So you must be able to set it clearly that, you know what, my education center relieves you from walking 10 miles by teaching you from your house. So that's my value proposition. So you pay me 1,000 Uganda shillings. Then the power of numbers, because one client will bring a second and so on and so forth. So NGOs, we need to learn to be very patient and start watering the products and services over time and be able to make more sales. Then a banker talked about something. One of the things I've learned over the years with the social enterprises in Uganda, we don't understand what cash flow means. If you go to any bank, if you go to any investor, any social investor, they will ask you, what is the cash flow? What is your cash flow? What is it that comes in every day as money, somebody paying for it? Now, we don't understand the cash flow language. So even if you're going to buy property, as we've discussed today, that property is not for you to sit in. Create a site for you to start getting in some little cash flow, because that's the language for investors to appreciate, and they'll be able to come in and invest with you. So cash flow is a journey that everybody needs to embrace, because it will be able to bring in the revenue that you need. And then to respond to one of the comments that somebody said, that how do you differentiate between the NGO arm and the commercial arm, or what we call a social enterprise? One, you can use two options. Like for me, the companies that have been able to run and they have a social enterprise arm, in the initial 1 to 2 years, the same board manages the social enterprise. You only need to get one staff on a desk. You design a business plan, and that staff helps. Usually they jump from finance. I used to lead finance, and I was able to design the social enterprise. So you start that social enterprise, market it a little bit, create systems that are almost similar to what the NGO has, and you start seeing the cash flow coming in. So in the third year, when it stabilizes, the board can decide to bring in some private sector mindset to run the committee of that social enterprise that will report to the main board. And that way you have a bit of distinction. And as you go forward, if it grows and you desire it to do what some of the NGOs have done, like GSI Inc., which has a red logo and a blue logo. One is a social enterprise, one is a purely NGO. It can have its own general manager, and then the NGO will have an ED, but they all have a meeting point at the governance level. So that also helps you to have a cutthroat commercial running, but plows back all the money. We had an NGO certificate with the organization I was leading, and we would have a tax exemption certificate because you are a NU, all the money was plowed back. So it is very doable if we open up our minds. So my last slide is that for all NGOs, our culture will determine where we are going. Why? Organizational culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you don't fix everything to do with culture, then the organization will not move to the next level. Thank you so much for your active listening.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for sticking to time, but also for finalizing and giving us a lot of thought. The chat section is open, so I know that it's already buzzing. So keep the conversation going, keep the questions coming. We will open up for plenary. But earlier, I recognize the presence of the private sector members that are present. We also have members of our development partners. I wasn't sure how to finish that conversation, but yes, we have development partners present on this call. So the Democratic Governance Facility, thank you for always being present for these conversations. We hope that you're learning as a facility and that we will be able to see some of the recommendations and conversations that we are having here in your strategy. We also would like to recognize the Royal Dutch Embassy. Thank you for joining us. And finally, Diaconia, thank you for being part of this conversation. For those I haven't mentioned, we recognize you. Thank you very much for sparing time to be with us. Going on next, we're going to be looking at welfare for civil society organization staff, looking at collective savings and investments, the Nafasi option. And I'm going to invite Mr. Leonard Okello. I know he has one slide, just one slide. Yeah, so Leonard is going to be taking us through our presentation. In case you have any questions on Nafasi, we have two Nafasi staff on the call who will be able to respond immediately in the chat section to any question that you raise. You're very much welcome, Leonard.
Somebody
Did you want to slide?
Give me one of my one slide. Thank you very much, colleagues. Let me start by a quick comment on the housing, acquiring property. If you watch carefully in this city, one of the richest men in this city, or richest people in this city, is today, and is a real estate mogul. So real estate is good business. Like every business, I think the question we should be asking ourselves is, what are we building this house for?
Yes.
You cannot just build a house for the sake of a house. What is this house for? Is this house going to be a business facility? Is it going to be residential for staff? Is it going to be an office facility only? Once you answer that question, then the next thing in real estate is always location, location, location. Because the location of it makes business sense of real estate.
Yes.
So, and I can tell you, in my view, that our problem is in the mindset. And that's what I'm going to do as we discuss Nafasi. I got into an international assignment in January 2003 and came back to Uganda in 2009. I was working with ActionAid International, running the international HIV program in ActionAid. I've just done the Uganda Participatory Poverty Assessment in the Ministry of Finance, then I left Richard in the Ministry of Finance, Richard in the Ministry of Finance. I came back when I had just become EP of the NGO Forum. Now, things which I think is important to note. By the time I returned to Uganda in 2009, the Danes had just elected a new government. And it was fairly right-wing government, and they cut funding to HIV work by 50%. That was a big message. AIDS was still a big problem in Africa, in my country where I was coming back to, and the funder which had been funding HIV big in my country had cut off funding by 50%. I landed in Uganda. The following week, I went and met Rita in the NGO Forum. I told him, my brother, I think the future for funding, my experience the last 7 years traveling around the world, meeting donors, meeting different NGOs, traveling different parts of the world, I learned that there's an emerging donor fatigue, especially in the home constituencies. The people working in the front line, in the offices in Kampala, in the different cities in Africa and Latin America and South Asia, they are trying to do their best. But the people who pay tax back home for this aid money to come are getting tired of giving money to this freebies type of money. And we need to start preparing for it. That is when I proposed to Richard that we set up a cooperative for NGOs. And typical of our way of working, I was asked to write a concept note. So I wrote the concept note. And the concept note was given to the director of programs, the manager then, Eunice Musime, who reviewed it and sent me comments. Typical of the way we do things in the NGO sector. I went and sent the comments, incorporated the comments and sent it back, and it kind of stagnated there. Then I set up the whole institute and decided that, you know what, we just start working and do something about it. Yes, in a Capital Palace Hotel here in Naguru near my office, and we agreed on the name Nafasi. Nafasi is the Kiswahili word meaning opportunity or space. And so we said we need to create opportunity for the staff of NGOs working in the NGO sector so that we can be able to save money regularly. And mainly it was for three things. We proposed that we save money for education. Many of us are young, we want to continue with education. Many of us have siblings who need money for school fees, and our parents are old and peasants. Build for his parents housing back home. One has used it to finish his housing, and both of them are still paying the loan. you know. But they now have, one has a house of his own, the other one has built a house for his parents. I know one who is a neighbor from near my office, is an auditor, he's completing his house in the next 6 months. It's a story building. And all that came from taking a loan in Nafasi. I also know one or two who have taken loans to actually get school, to pay their own further education here in this country. So what we set Nafasi for is already working. I remember one of us, a senior ED or one of the organizations was, his father was not in good shape. I was a board member of that organization. And he had to come, on top of getting money from his own, he had to go to Nafasi and find a way he can pick some money on. So the question of health, education, and housing is already being solved by Nafasi, as I talk. At the time of setting Nafasi, I had gone to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and discussed how many people are, on average in the NGO sector. They told me they didn't have a accurate figure, but they estimate that 500,000 people work in the NGO sector in this country. So I did simple arithmetic. If 500,000 people are working in the NGO sector and each of them saves 100,000 savings per month, that would be 50 billion saving in a month. That makes sense. We'll be saving 50 billion every month. A bank account where 50 billion goes every month, that bank will want to talk business with you. This is what the idea was. Second thing is, if we save for a year, we'll be talking 600 billion in a year. If we save for 5 years, we'll be talking 3 trillion. My friends, at that time, DGF, which is who is here on this list, was giving us good money. And we're all being paid well, but we're eating our salaries and we're not saving. So if now funding becomes a problem, we should blame ourselves. Because we already had, even with this 3 trillion, we can create jobs for ourselves. We can actually translate this money into enterprises that can employ us if we did it for 5 years. That was my dream at that time. And that's what our dream when we started. But you know, and the other thing which I found which was very, very serious was that in the cutting of financing and the growing donor fatigue, the risk to us as individuals working in the NGO sector, just individuals. You see, you can have NGO forum collapse, and somebody forms another alliance or something, and it becomes still the typical organization like NGO forum, a platform for sharing. But you see, if Joy does not have food on the table, if Joyce does not has education not complete, if Joyce has a health problem and cannot deal with it, it hits a human being, a taxpayer, a person we know. No, it affects the staff more. So the collapse of funding, external funding from the organization, affects the individual, each of us, and that's what Nafasa was dealing with. If individuals are saving, and this kind of level of saving, we could actually create jobs to make the individual life more self-sustaining. Because with this kind of money, if we had it, we could actually buy bonds. And this money keep growing. It will not just sit doing nothing. We can make it keep growing. You get the point? So the opportunity was very, very big. And I think the opportunity is still very big. We can create jobs. We can go do bonds. We can even create other investments that go beyond just, we can investment that create jobs for ourselves. We can start employing ourselves with this kind of saving if we really went serious for it. Of course, in real life, we cannot get all the 500,000 come at the go. It grows over time. And usually when we start things, people take time. I've been there in the cooperative world the last 7 years. One thing I've learned, every cooperative starts, people come in big numbers. Then after some time, people drop off. And then when things stabilize, people start coming back. That's okay. That's actually a very, very typical cycle of growth for a business or especially a membership organization like cooperatives. And it is actually, I think, going to happen with Nafasi. So I think the opportunity comes for us to know that we have very good opportunity for ourselves. Now, the one thing I want to draw is the challenges we have. First problem is that we disagreed on strategy. On what do we do to become sustainable? We had a lot of things going on. We had a lot of free and fair election things going on, Black Monday going on, all those things. Advocacy Taiwan, many of us wanted results like yesterday. But change and transformation takes time. And therefore, in disagreeing on strategy, we then all did not agree that actually we lost focus on the need for our own personal, individual self-sustainability. And we went in all different directions. The second thing I think we had, which was a bit of interest, is that we found ourselves in the sphere of the unknown. You know, when you don't know what it is, I can tell you, we all did not know what a cooperative is. Even me was making noise at that time. I didn't know what a cooperative was. What I knew was that when my father was in prison in Luzera and died there, the cooperative movement paid my school fees in Kigezi High School. Land Cooperative Union contributed 75% of the money which was used by my local government to pay school fees in Kigezi High School for me for 2 years. So I knew that passionate that cooperative can do something good. But how they work, what they are, what principles and values are, I did not know. I had to plunge myself into it and learn about it. And I can tell you this. From my learning, I think we have a big opportunity in the cooperative movement. The first thing is that by joining NAFASIM and the People's Cooperative Union and the Cooperative Society, we would join now about 15 million plus cooperative movement. Membership of the cooperative movement in Uganda has grown from about 4.6 to 5 million when I first joined. Now we're talking 15 million plus, and the numbers are growing. Many people are joining, forming cooperatives. Others are not necessarily forming because they believe in it, they want to get some money, but it's growing. So that for me, in the way we work, this kind of advocacy work, we are building social movements or whatever kind of thing. In fact, we then become the social movement itself. We join and become active members of already a growing movement and support them and make them more active, better informed, better innovative and thinking in the way we think. So opportunity is out there for us to actually join and grow with it and be part of it. I found that every time I've gone for a cooperative meeting, I've introduced myself, Leonard Okillo, I'm the CEO of Uhuru Institute, but I'm a member of NAFASIM and the People's Cooperative. I fit there without anybody wondering what is this NGO doing here. They know I am a member of a cooperative. I'm discussing because I have the same problems. And the problems we are facing in NAFASIM, all cooperatives have faced it. So in my view, the opportunity is very, very high. And I think we should. And the other thing is NAFASIM has matured, guys. NAFASIM has matured. It has matured. At the time we started, it was sitting in the NGO, in Uhuru Institute. We were meeting all the administrative costs. We had some 10 million shillings or so funding, which have administrative costs. Today, NAFASIM runs its own facility. NAFASIM runs its own administrative costs. All business costs of NAFASIM run by its own. It's no longer inside Uhuru Institute. It's now completely, can you imagine growing from being given administrative costs to now it runs its own business. Its own manager, and it could grow and get bigger every time. So I think the story which Joyce is telling us is actually what has happened to NAFASIM. It is tough, it is hard. People are not very sure about it. It takes over and grows and becomes what to be proud of. Now, the reason why I think I want to leave from the issue of cooperative is very important, and particularly NAFASIM being a cooperative is this. Is you know what? Cooperatives are based on certain values. And the values are self-responsibility, self-help. Those are the two most powerful. We just completed a research on these values. And one thing coming out very clear, that the most powerful value in a cooperative is self-responsibility. We must take self-responsibility. And this is what is facing us today. This is what Joyce was talking about. She's telling us, you have to dare the devil, get into it and get moving. You have to take responsibility and then move away from external funding, only start from within, so that whoever is coming to help you from outside is just an addition. That's where we should, in my view. It's about equality, it's about equity. Things that NGOs do is what cooperatives do every day. It's about transparency, accountability, integrity, solidarity, and caring for others. These are the values that will describe what a cooperative is. If a cooperative runs well based on these values, you find them very successful. I can give you an example. Many of you are Christians in this city. You go and meet the manager and the CEO of YSF, the People's Cooperative, one of the biggest cooperatives in the town. It started with over 1,000 people joining. After 2 months, they remained 40. Today, they're in thousands. Today, they're in billions. Tens of billions out there, and they're growing to hundreds of billions. Why? Because they kept this principle, these values very alive in every time they meet. Secondly, they meet on every month. There's a monthly education kind of interaction meeting. People have married there. People have built business there. Pastor businesses. People have made friendship. People build even other clubs, but they belong to the same because they meet quite often. The thing about cooperatives, not just about doing business, is about social interaction. People, members of cooperatives should be meeting regularly. We had even dreamt that one thing we'll have a club where NGO staff meet here in Kampala and different parts of the country, branded very clearly, so that it becomes a place where when you go, you just need your coupon. I mean, you are dedicated, you walk in, you enjoy as an NGO staff, you are part of, and you are linked and connected to any NGO part of the, or in certain part of the, in any part of the country. That is the secondary thing. The final thing is that, you know, the biggest weakness we got, the last blow that actually hit the recruitment of membership. One thing we did not do. We did not do enough mobilization. We did not do like go have regional meetings. But in that, the final thing that hit was somebody spread a rumor. The AGM sat and decided that everybody must contribute 2,000 shillings. 2,000 shillings only per person for administrative costs. Because now the money that Uhuru had was coming to an end, we should start getting prepared. Somebody who did not attend the meeting, who was not even a member of NAFASI yet, spread a rumor in the NGO sector that Leonard had arranged to get quietly 2,000 shillings from everybody to eat our money. I know it because a very senior NGO staff met me to raise this concern. How can you Leonard do this? I can't imagine you can be part of this. That scared many people who wanted to join. So let me tell you, we are destroying ourselves by spreading fake rumors on ourselves. That's our big weakness. We should not allow ourselves to destroy what is growing among us. We should build, and we have opportunity to build. And by the way, for me, I didn't take it badly because I know this thing. I'm in the private sector. I know this thing happens. You get all kinds of things. Talk about the story of the lion and the gazelle. That is what you meet in the private sector every time. And I can tell you, for me, this story was the lion and the gazelle story. I knew time will come when we shall get back to realize we were making a mistake. And I can tell everybody in this room, please, those are online and those are with me here, the possibility of protecting the sustainable income for our members, for our staff across the country is very high, and growing a big institution that would actually make us connected, believing and supporting each other, and having daily income sustainably for the long term. Finally, I think as members of staff of the NGO sector, we also need to recognize that at a certain time, we can actually invite our organization to join us. But the law provides that we must, it has to, any private company, any other with the cooperative cannot join unless it's approved by the registrar. It means we should pass a resolution at a certain time when the system is stabilized, then our organizations can join as shareholders. They can also buy shares to do it. Because the thing is, we are all shareholders. They're like any private company, cooperatives are shareholdings. They are not just contribution. And they say, what is often used in our remit as NGOs, we say, what contribution are you making? It is buying shares, not contributions. Contributions are gifts. Shares are ownership and responsibility. And that is what we need to understand. Cooperatives is about shareholding and responsibility. There's no contribution. The shareholding, your equity inside the cooperative, and your savings. All that when it's used, you get your, at the end of it all, you get dividends at the end of the year, but also the businesses inside the cooperative, the services the cooperative gives to you as a member, gives you much more than what a dividend will actually give you. Because by its very nature, in a cooperative, the first customer of a cooperative, in this case, must always be its member. Cooperatives are member founded, member owned, member controlled, and member utilized. Yes. If you want to run a successful cooperative, every manager or the leader of the cooperative must know your first customer is your members. So there, if other persons come out, in fact, in some countries in the world, if you go to a club which belongs to a cooperative, even if you have money, you cannot buy beer in that club. You give your money to the member, and the member goes and buys the beer. Because you need to have a card to buy beer in that place. It's really very, we won't call it exclusive for membership. So it serves members and build the social ties because man, God bless you.
Thank you very much, Leonard, for such an inspiring talk on NAFASI. I believe that there's a lot of questions in the chat section. I don't have access to the chat, but I should have in a little bit of time. But in the event that you want to join NAFASI, it's very possible for you to become a member in the next 5 minutes. And I believe that there is already guidance in the chat section. You need a minimum of about 160,000 for the first go. Yeah. And forms, and I know that the NAFASI team is in the chat. Send them your email address and they should be able to send you those documents. You print them out, scan them, in 5 minutes, you'll be a member of NAFASI. So don't leave this call still wondering what to do.
Is each organization, one is to provide like regional trainings for staff members to understand how COVID run, so they come in on what the fear of the unknown can be messy. It can take time to get. Secondly, we need human resource managers and the EDs or the finance people also to go through their own session of how to help people save. Because usually the problem that you have joined, and therefore you sign a paper proving that your salary this amount can be deducted every month to office. They all at the end of the month you've joined the person. You then sign a form allowing HR and the finance to deduct your certain amount of money every month to join the person. In almost all these, what I call worker-based cooperatives like this one, people tend to do it that way and it makes it faster for us to save together as a government. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Leonard. And yes, we'll be moving on to building a successful CEO fund in Uganda. Opportunities and progress so far, the Ujasiri Fund option. In the last conversation, Ujasiri came up and there were quite a number of questions. And Winnie is here to shed light on progress so far around the Ujasiri Fund. So you're welcome, Winnie.
Thank you very much, Isabella. As I wait for the slides to come on. So Ujasiri is a civil society fund that was established 3 years back. And what we really believe is that civil society businesses may have, academia and all the other sectors, but civil society plays a very, very important role, and therefore it must be supported. And that, Ashanut talked about, that Joy has spoken about, as well as Leonard. So one see that there's independence, but there's also sustainability for civil society. So we support, the fund supports efforts towards sustainable peace, strengthening democracy, rule of law, advancing equal opportunity, as well as shared prosperity and pursuit of social justice. So why do we start with Ujasiri? As you all know, that the internal and external environment is changing, and that definitely impacts on how civil society works. Everyone talks about shrinking civic space. We have seen it, we are under it, we are around it, and it's also around us. The ever-changing donor funding priorities. Today is climate change, tomorrow it's oil and gas, the other day is HIV and AIDS. And then these institutions, organizations, before their objectives are fulfilled, you want to change around and follow the donor, where the donor is putting money. So we don't want that. We don't want to keep hopping from one area to another because priorities are changing. We want to see that Ugandan NGOs are committed to eradicating poverty, and so sustainably work towards eradicating poverty. 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, until you achieve your dream. But we also know that the models of funding delivery is changing. We are seeing many donors putting their money together in a basket. And when that money is in one basket, it becomes very hard for the small organizations competing with big organizations, competing with medium organizations to access that money. So Ujasiri comes and is coming to say, where is the gap? How can we make sure that every civil society, small or big, can access money from Uganda, from the Ugandan fund? So that is why we come in. But we also know that there are those organizations that may not get money from our traditional donors as we know them, because of the issue they are addressing, because of they don't have the certificates, they don't have audited accounts, they don't have all these things that donors ask of us when we are looking for funds. Where do we get money from as Ujasiri? So we have a memorandum of understanding that is signed by all members who joined the fund. And our first source of funding is annual contribution by members. We have about 7 members, organizations who have committed and are contributing. And initially we had put, we were very ambitious. So, each of us should bring 20 million, but then we, as the discussions went on, we raised, because maybe we're being exclusive and we're going to commit every year. It's still a small fund, but there's potential for it to grow. But there's also expect that we're going to be having dedicated investment contributions. just talked about investing. So if we decided we want to go into real estate, then we're going to be asking member organizations to contribute towards investing in whatever investment option we would have selected. We also know that our investments are going to be earning as income. So we're going to be earning from the investments that we make. But we also know that Ugandans like to give. And so individuals can contribute to the fund. I think the first year we started, an individual gave us $300, another one gave us $500. And we know that Ugandans really give, a middle income Ugandan gives up to 30% of their income to charity, to helping out, car wash, access to medical care, education. So we know that that kind of heart that is already there can be utilized to fund the city. But also we recognize that there are donors and grants out there that come conditionally. And I know every civil society meeting you go to, there is that discussion of a donor and their money. A donor and their money and the conditions that they are attaching. So we are open to receiving funding from donors, but it cannot come with conditions that we are running away from. And then of course, our management and consultancy fee, because we have civil society is rich in knowledge, it can give consultancy, it can use consultancies and money that can then be used to fund civil society organizations in Uganda. Do we see any opportunities? Of course. The fact that 7 of us, I think we're about 4, came together and said, let's have a fund, let's call it Uja City. And then when we mentioned it, people committed and they're contributing. It's, for me, it's a plus. And we already have many commitments, but because of the different challenges, institutions are not able to honor their commitments now, but the willingness is there, the buy-in is there, and we must capitalize on that. I also mentioned the generosity of Ugandans. They give to the cause that they understand, that they feel that addresses a real life situation. But also the challenging funding situation, the suspension of DGF. If the suspension of DGF does not make us think, if we don't treat it as an opportunity, then we'll have missed a point. So when things like this happen, how do we turn that around and grow ourselves? If a DGF is suspended, another donor is also suspended, are we going to close the offices and go back home? No. So this gives us an opportunity to say, how do we, as Ugandans, generate money to run the causes that we care about as Uganda? And then also, of course, the suspension of civil society, or the 54 civil society organizations, that also, makes us think, how do we fund ourselves? How, because if you have been suspended, it's going to be very hard for a donor to give you money the following day, because there are things whereby you need to do well. There are things whereby that miscommunication between the bureau and the NGOs, but also there were challenges that you couldn't meet, couldn't resolve, and so that's why you are suspended. So those kinds of opportunities for us, we see them as providing us with a platform to get into our house and say what is happening and how can we use this for the good of our sector. We have also seen that there is support from donors. Last year, I think December, we had a situation with suspension of, with freezing of some organizations, and donors reached out to us. They said, you have had this fund, how can we help? And so we received unconditional grants, say, here is the money, use it whichever way you want to support institutions that are affected. And a number of them were helped. I think 4 of them were helped. It may not have been a lot of money, but the fact that will is there, that donors will say, we're giving you money, support your members, support Uganda civil society, is an opportunity that we can base on. And when we get money, unconditional grants, then we are also able to invest in the things that we care about, in the things that can bring us more money to have a bigger civil society fund. And also, of course, when we hear the testimonies of those that have been helped, you feel encouraged, you realize you're actually useful, and you're there for a very good reason. So you're not wasting time, and we feel it's encouraging us. I mentioned we only have about 7 NGOs that have committed and are paying in money, contributing to the fund. So the progress is slow. It's there, but it is slow. 3 years down the road, it could have been much bigger than this. So why do we think there is this slow progress? Every time we talk about Ujasiri, the first question is, how do I benefit? And it's a very valid question, but I feel sometimes discouraged that we are looking at ourselves today now, how do I benefit? But we are getting money from people that we don't even know, as you can see, society. We are sitting under trees that we don't know who planted them. We are enjoying that shade. We are eating fruits that, those trees, we never planted them. Our great grandfathers did. So how do we see ourselves as contributing to a bigger cause than ourselves? How do we see ourselves as addressing a country issue that other people care about, and how can they enjoy the benefits that we have created for them? So I think that in a way, they're thinking of how do I benefit? How does my organization benefit? Takes us away from the spirit of Ujasiri, because we are saying we want new civil society groups to emerge. And you're already there, you're an old civil society. We are saying we want to see new civil society emerging. We want to support Pretty Commission initiatives. We want to support those things that cannot be supported. And we have the money and we have the privilege. So that I think is also slowing us. But we can have a conversation so that we reassure everyone, so that we see ourselves beyond today and our immediate needs. It's also a very dry season for most of the organizations. COVID happened, donors, one big donor was suspended, and everywhere you go, they say, what, we are waiting for disbursement. We don't know how far the talks are going. Yes, that's what we are saying. And it's sad, but yeah, it's a reality. So we are all dry, we're waiting for the next letter. Every time we go to office and we're checking our email to see, waiting for the good news of the suspension has been lifted. It's not lifted yet. So many organizations are dry, and we understand. So the question around accountability, and it's the elephant in the room, is our money safe? And as civil society leaders, as we know, we are setting up Ujasiri, we are setting up Nafasi, we are setting up all these things. Is our money safe? It's a question that that keeps coming up. And indeed, yes, your money is safe, but we also want to have a bigger conversation. How safe do you want your money to be? So Ujasiri is young, it's developing, and we want it to be informed by every single civil society actor in Uganda, by every single business person out there in Uganda, so that we know we can raise money, we can account for it, we can invest it wisely, we can create the change that we all seek. The other aspect, of course, is the inclusiveness. How local is local? We talked about supporting local organizations, contributions from local organizations. But who are these local organizations? Is the NGO forum as local as Guru NGO forum? Is that, can they contribute the same amount of money? Should we set a uniform fee for everyone to pay? Would the benefits be shared equally? So the question of inclusiveness, understanding who is in the sector, how can they contribute? Can you get, can every Mutua wants to contribute, or are we targeting corporates to be the one to put money into the city? So those are questions that we talk about every day, that we want members, our prospective members of the city to talk about and say, this fund is good, it can be more helpful if we address this and that and the other. Yes. So in conclusion, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's what I always read in the room when we talk about Ujasiri. They want to pay, but there is a but. We want to pay, but the disbursement. We want to pay, but there's something that So that's a bit that's small weakness. And for me, when I look at how far we have come from, especially in the COVID period, so many people have started up businesses. They are selling charcoal. The teachers have now gone away from teaching. They're selling matoke, they're selling shoes, they're selling all this. What have we started as civil society from COVID? What have we started? Online, people are doing all sorts of things. What have we started? The spirit is willing, but our flesh is so weak. We just don't want to get out of our comfort zone. Some of us have not even met our this year's contribution. And we don't know whether we're going to meet it because, again, of some other factors that if we are not courageous enough, we are not going to move over. we must also change the narrative and practices around funding. And me, you, us together, this thing of funding, there is us and them, needs to stop. We are the funders, we can fund our fund, we can make contributions to the fund, we can fund our initiatives, and also recognize that there's so much contribution that we never capture actually. When you go to a community and you're having a meeting under someone's tree in that shade, you have their benches, you're at a church, you're at a school, all that contribution, we want to recognize it at the city, but also to know that it does not have to be the dollars every day. It can be something want to access better services. Very many civil society groups were suspended, as I mentioned. They need advice, they need lawyers, they need auditors, they need all sorts of support to enable them to meet the requirements. Ujasiri come to support those that a traditional donor would not have supported. And that's the kind of support that we are giving. And also it means courage. And so we cannot act otherwise. Yes, we have to summon the courage and know that yes, we can build a fund that we make sure we are sustainable, that efforts are sustainable, that we are independent, that we are truly Ugandan, and we are addressing everyday Ugandan situation that we find ourselves in, but also that we are building for the future. It's not about us today. It's most importantly about that is yet to come, that we are sitting on, that people are scared of talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winnie, and I hope that you have enjoyed Winnie's submission. We're going to go straight into plenary, and as you can see, our time is fast spent. We should be closing at 12:30, and I'm going to beg for our indulgence so that we can close at 12:45, so get an extra 15 minutes. If you would like to contribute to this conversation, please put up your hand or send us any comments or questions through the chat section. We will take questions for exactly 10 minutes and then come back to the panel so that we can be able to close at exactly 12:45. So Angela Nakasuja, your hand is up. We will take you. Okay. Okay, Angela is on. Angela? Okay, we seem not to have Angela. Let's have Okema William. Okema William. Let's have Okkello Immaculate.
Thank you, Chair. My question is that I like the presentation from both speakers, Winnie and Okkello. As one of those in a CBO, my interest is I needed some more information regarding Nafasi. I did not get to hear background information on Nafasi, especially looking at their financial position, because I'm interested in the benefits they're offering. I did not see the area of operation, unless I missed it out. I also wanted to know the terms and conditions of those loans that you're offering, because my interest is what is in it for us.
Do we have any other hands or do we close the hands? Hussein Kato.
Hello.
Hello, Hussein.
My question is, I wanted to know.
Okay, so Hussein, please go ahead.
I was asking, how do I become a member of Nafasi? I saw, do they have field offices or the operations are only in Kampala, where around Rugogo there?
Okay, so for anyone asking for modalities of joining Nafasi, please go to the chat section. Sejoa Edward is giving all the information. He's the manager of Nafasi, okay, and he's giving all the Nafasi related information in the chat section. Okay. Benson from Soroti City. Benson, the city has no internet today. One of the last cities. Yes, Benson. Benson. I'm having trouble asking people to unmute.
Ask him to unmute.
Yes, but it is not responsive.
Hello?
Okay. Yes, Benson.
Yes, I want to appreciate the two presenters. When I combine the two words, nafasi and ujasiri, it simply means opportunity with the courage. I think for me, what is needed for us to grab these opportunities is just a change of the mindset. You can imagine from 1989, when we started this work, we all knew that to achieve our social goals, you needed to seek for a grant. We were never trained to work for money to fulfill our goals like it is done in the private sector. Because in the private sector, you mobilize your resources, you invest, and then you earn, and then you work. For us, you simply needed to seek for a grant, or some lose money in some quarters, and things could work out. I think for me, nafasi and ujasiri give us a challenge this time to think around. I think it is time for us to start thinking differently, working out and in making investments, looking for funds, mobilizing resources, investing in order to finance our social goals. And I think I welcome the idea. We only need to go out, to move from just sitting and talking, because I'm sure this is the 20th time we've been discussing this thing, more than 20th, and in the last 6-7 years. So I think we need to start really working out, even if it means starting work. And this will appreciate the 7 members who have taken up a step in Ujasiri, and I'm sure many others who are already in Nafasi. So to me, it is very brilliant, very challenging. It only needs courage for us to grab the opportunity. I thank you very much. Leonard, thank you. Never tire. And Winnie, do not get tired. Keep on sowing the seed. And
thank you, Benson. Thank you,
and
Benson.
I just remember the story of
Benson. Okay, Benson's story has been cut off.
Yes.
Elliot asks Joyce, some organizations would love to start social enterprises but have a big problem with high taxes. How can CSOs advocate for reduced or removal of taxes on some products or commodities? And then we will have Xavier Joy.
Thank you so much, Isabella and colleagues. I want to add my voice in thanking Leonard and Winnie for the elaborate presentation on Nafasi and Ujasiri, as well as the earlier discussions about the sustainability subject. The question I have is for Winnie, relating to, I think, the second last slide where you talked about reasons for slow growth. It seemed like the question I have is, are we comfortable where we are with the slow growth? Because my assumption is we are not. If we are not, and we know those reasons, what are we projecting to address those reasons for slow growth of Ujasiri? So we're talking about sustainability, NGO sustainability in the entire webinar today. And one thing that came to me clearly is that if your interaction with sector leaders or members, they're raising the issue of what is it that with clarity I'm contributing towards. It seems the need, like, what boundaries do we have? And an open-ended question is not going to address some of the fears and reservations that they have. So back to the reasons for slow growth, I mean, it would be good for you to highlight how you are moving away from those reasons for growth, the slow growth, to addressing some of the reservations and fears so that the sector itself will champion and lead this Nafasi to the higher level. After all, in the earlier conversations, for example, acquiring of, we saw that vision or purpose sustaining, that is an area that conversation, but going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xavier. Alan asks me what's the current grant portfolio for Ujasiri and what are the immediate follow-up plans. Angela asks, how can we access information on social entrepreneurship? I think that would go to Joyce. We will take Kuvaje Joyce. Kuvaje Joyce, you may speak.
Hello. Yeah, am I there?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm very glad for the second chance. I have just got 3 simple questions.
Just one.
I think going to Ujasiri Fund. I've got 3 questions. I think going to Madam Winnie. One, where their offices are found. Ujasiri Fund, where their offices found if somebody needs to. And another thing, what are the qualities or qualifications one should, an NGO should have to access their funds, apart from the registration and the account, as she has said? What are other necessities that needed to a CBO to access their fund? Then lastly, how are you people, I think this one goes to the forum, how are you people ready to intervene into the NGOs, mostly the young ones, into their organization, make them at least they are very well organized and on the same page with you people. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
I'm Joyce.
To Ashanut, what was the sampling technique used to identify the NGO selected for the study? And then may we have Sabiti? Okay, since Sabiti is not speaking, I'm going to bring the conversation back to the panel to respond to any of the questions or issues that was raised from the plenary, and then we should be able to close in a little bit. Joyce, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much, moderator. Well, the issue of social entrepreneurship is new, especially in Uganda, but is the future of all organizations that are working for impact and social. So for more information, we do have a social entrepreneurship forum at Capital Solutions, where every 2 weeks we dialogue on social entrepreneurship, but also we have a lot of information on our website, which I already put down, www.capitalsolutionsug.com. You can learn a lot about social entrepreneurship. You can as well join the accelerator programs that we run for 6 months to sharpen you to start a social enterprise. We come to your organization and sit with you and also design a social enterprise for you from scratch and work with you on the journey. So it's a very, very new thing, scary, but it's the future of all NGOs.
There's just one that has just come in. Does an organization need to conduct a feasibility study and develop a business plan before venturing into a social enterprise?
Not necessarily. From your program work that you've been doing, there's need to just have a dialogue and say which direction can we invest in to do some business or sell our services, and we see whether people can be able to invest in them. So it's just a desk review of what you've done and the market in Uganda. In terms of taxes, Elliot asked, in fact, what scares NGOs in this world is tax. Yet tax is the end result of every business. Taxes in Uganda have been made better, and so we shouldn't be worried about taxes because it's the end of everything that we've spent if you're doing business. But also, we started discussions with Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Trade. They are working on how social enterprises can be supported in terms of paying taxes that are less than the normal corp tax.
Thank you very much, Joyce. Charlotte, you had, yes, Leonard.
Yes, if I can add something to what Joyce is saying around a social enterprise, the thing is this. There is this assumption in our head that we are the only ones who can do advocacy. let me tell you, the private sector does 10 times better advocacy than we do. And the government listens to them faster because they pay tax. They employ very many people, more than we do. So actually, even if you transform into social business, you would influence government policy with a lot more authenticity and legitimacy than if you are an NGO getting money from outside. So that's a challenge we're dealing with. I need to recognize that. Actually, in my office, every enterprise has 3 roles. We have to mobilize the people, we have to build their capacity so that they're a good client for us, and we have to work with them to advocate for policies that make what they're doing in social impact work for them and for the community. That is how we run every day. So in doing so, we are doing what the average NGO can do, but also doing business.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonard. Ashanut, you had one question?
Yeah, around the sampling.
Yes.
It was purposive sampling, and what we did was to look for organizations working in different sectors, different kinds of organizations, membership organizations, national organizations, organizations based in Kampala and those based out of Kampala. So we tried to get the diversity, but also looking at the way in which they acquired the property. You had those who purchased already existing properties, and then there are those who did construction. So it was purposive.
Okay, thank you very much. Leonard, did you have any questions? Although a lot of the NAFASI related issues were addressed in the chat.
Yeah, for the NAFASI type question, really the manager and the chair and the credit committee chair are online.
Yes.
And they're engaging. So I think it is technically wrong for me to start doing that when the real leaders, current leaders are there.
Yes.
What I can only say for all of us is we need to dare the devil. We need to be willing to take the risk. The most successful people on earth are risk takers. Many Christians know Jesus took a risk to get to the cross. We sing his name every day here. The Muslims know Muhammad fought many battles. They sing his name as a prophet. Museveni fought for many years, 5 years in Wales. He's ruled us for 35 years plus, becoming 40 years. So if you want to succeed, be willing to take risks. Even going to areas you don't know, you can make it. When I see what I'm now doing in cooperatives, which I didn't know when I went into, how many cooperatives are asking me to go for training now? How many are running to buy the book, the recent cooperative business handbook which we produced? I tell myself it was a great idea to go into this wild area I had no idea on. The most important thing about business, a business which does not solve a problem is not a business. Business which solve a problem, get customers. So we should ask ourselves as NGOs, are we really solving the real problems of the people? Even in this advocacy work, in terms of private, even ask the people in the private areas, the election, human rights, food, education, all these problems, and ask them, what is the priority thing what has to deal with now? All these things, including food, housing, whatever, are still election things.
Yes.
But we think we should only talk election and not talk about this other one. And yet these are the ones that politicians promise. Politicians promise you are going to have food, you are going to have housing, you are going to have hospital and schools until they win election or rig election.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonard. And finally, let's have Winnie to walk us through the Ujasiri questions, after which we will have Mr. Moses, Dr. Moses Isova from the Uganda National NGO Forum to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Isabella, and thank you, participants, for the question. Zambia, I hear you very, very well, and I think the discussion on Ujasiri and the discussion on what's our purpose as civil society. We have had these conversations at every leaders retreat, and I think we need to go back indeed and have more of those conversations, ask ourselves what is our purpose and how connected are we to that purpose, and then we'll understand why investing in a Ujasiri makes is an important thing. But I know also that we have, as leaders of Ujasiri, been not at our best, and so we commit, or I commit from this meeting that we should be able to provide you more information. We should not dismiss, and if I felt like I dismissed these concerns, that was not the point. But I think we shall be providing with you more information on how safe our money is, so that the question of accountability and transparency is addressed. For now, I can tell you that our funds are at CivSource, that are physical hosts. for the Ujasiri. And so, we should be doing more convening and having honest and brutal conversations, but also shaping the kind of Ujasiri that we want to have. So also the same goes to answer the question on offices. So our hosts for now is CivSource, and at the end of the year when we meet, we'll be choosing who our next host is if CivSource does not qualify at that point. The issues to support, again, we are trying as much as possible to be different from the traditional donors that we have known of permit, of that, of FOIA audit reports. So we address mainly the issue first. So you just have to present your issue first, and the council will look at it. The council is the governing body, which is made up of organizations that have contributed to the fund. So they will look at your issue, and if they think it qualifies enough, then they will discuss with you in terms of ways of accounting for the funds, ways of accessing funds, and also how we're going to monitor the impact that the funds are contributing. But we want to be different from what has stopped many organizations from getting funds out there. How can we decentralize Ujasiri efforts? For now, the decentralization is that we support anyone from any part of Uganda, but the contributions are going into a pool, the Ujasiri Fund, and so we do not have as yet the mechanisms for decentralizing the funds being managed here, there, because the fund is really small and young. So the efforts are decentralized in terms of who can contribute, which causes we can support, but in terms of management, we still do not have the infrastructure to have a decentralized fund yet. That's it. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all the questions and the comments in the chat, and thank you guys for being awesome.
Okay, thank you very much, Winnie. And at this time, we're going to invite Moses, Dr. Moses Isola, to give us closing remarks. You're very much welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Isabella. And first of all, I'd like to thank CivSource, who are the co-conveners for this very, very important dialogue. And my special thanks, of course, go to panelists who have actually explored this subject of sustainability to very, very great depth. Just in terms of my closing remarks, the subject of NGO sustainability is a subject that has gained currency in the last couple of years, but it's been there for so many years. I'm reminded a couple of years ago, maybe 15 years of this country still are in many districts, maybe with the exception of the new districts. That nice building is a courthouse. And I remember the Danish ambassador then being asked, why are you building these courthouses when we don't have judges? And his answer was very simple, but quite very insightful. He said, these buildings were put there, even those judges would remain symbols of the donors at that time were of supporting organizations in terms of having institutional homes. At that time, it wasn't called real property because the idea of NGOs having property was not attracting appetite. So we're calling it having institutional homes. And I remember then the donors went from one district to another to helping district NGOs to be able to have institutional homes. And for about 3 reasons. One, that these institutional homes would serve as incubators for small emerging groups who then they would be incubated here. These would also serve as greenhouses of some sort to support the small ones to emerge. And finally, that these would be the laboratories of democracy. Those were the ideas then with the donors. But right now, the landscape has drastically changed. And it's very, very important that we pay special attention on the subject of property acquisition as a way of acquiring sustainability. Just to re-echo what Joyce said, within the NGO Act, which is our legislation that governs us, it is very clear that you as an NGO, you can actually be able to do business. And with the caveat, of course, that for as long as the whatever you get is plowed back to promote the mission of the organization. I think that's an important section 46 of the NGO Act, which we need to take advantage of, that we need to do business. We need to do business in as a way to be able to be sustainable as organizations. Once you try to go, okay, just to make sure that everything is going as the fears that I was hearing some of the people express. What happens to this business, or what happens to this when maybe the organization winds up? Again, the NGO Act in section 49, okay, and I think it's very important as a section of dissolution in our constitutions, so that then we can actually be able to do business, so that we can actually be able to get away of being sustainable. Now, maybe to end up on like two things. Very important. Oftentimes, when we're speaking to people about governance for institutional health, the board is either to get you money, to give you money. Unfortunately, the next G is if you cannot do the first two, you get out. So you either, as a board, you're able to help your organizations get money using your networks, give money to the organizations, or get out. Because the reasons that different people are put on the board, and some of the panelists here on boards, they are looking for your treasure that, as organizations, we have board members that will help to drive us into that trajectory of actually having social enterprises that can actually be able to be ability. Of course, there is always the fear. No, I'm an NGO, and as an NGO, I don't want to do business. Recipe for what people call Organization X, to the left for free. That's the really NGO. To the right for a fee. That's the social enterprise. But as organizations, we should be able to immunize ourselves against this size of schizophrenia and be able to do business as outlined within the NGO Act, so that we can actually be able to survive. We can actually be able to prepare for the day. So whatever we do, the times of actually only having to depend on donors decreasing in the leaders, also of organizations. Hearing that these are donors yesterday be able to get into these spaces, as for that we can actually talk about the subject of sustainability when we are members of NAFASI, when we are members of the city, and then we can actually then begin talking about aspects of property acquisition. Yeah. But this is a conversation that is we need to continue engaging ourselves in. And once again, I would like to thank CivSource that invested first of all into this seminal research of property acquisition and what it means. and the kind of work also as NGO forum, which we've actually been doing to hold these regular conversations on the subject of sustainability. And thanks, Winnie, for sharing the story of Ujasiri, and of course, Leonard for sharing the story of Nafasi. And Joyce, you are one of those that will remain our North Star, to be able to challenge us to do business. That is something that we cannot shy away.